Hello, good afternoon and even good evening, and good morning even to those who are going to watch this video in the morning. Today I have come with new idea of the business communication textbook, and today's topic is the first unit about the communication process, how it is communicated, how English is communicated, how we communicate the language, and there are the techniques of communication. So the communication, the word process indicates a series of actions or steps taken to complete an event. And in communication there is a process. Without process there would be no communication. And process means series of actions or steps that can be taken to complete any event. So communication is about sending, receiving and understanding information and meaning, right? A sends a text message to B. A has an idea or information to communicate to B, and then A then becomes the source or the sender of the message, and B becomes the receiver of the message, right? So A is a person who sends the message, sends the text, sends the information, sends the idea or communicates the idea to the B, and that B is an audience, right? And that receives. So there is always sender and receiver in the process of communication, right? So in the process of communication, if there is no sender and receiver, and the communication cannot take place. So communication process means sending message, sending idea, sending information and by the sender, and receiving the message sent by the sender by the receiver, right? So it is a two-way traffic. There are two people at least to communicate, one addresser and another one is addressee. Addresser is called sender of the message, of the ideas, of the information, and addressee is called receiver of the message, that is called audience. The message is transmitted by a telephone, by gestures, and even with communication, different types of communications, face-to-face communication. There are various types of communication systems. Communication is a more complex and dynamic process. It is not as easy as we have thought. So communication is a complex and then even dynamic process. It goes on changing, right? So there are different elements of communication, just elements of the communication process. So before the elements of communication, we talked about communication. How communication takes place. What is the process? Process means the event, the action that completely takes place in an event. Without the process communication cannot take place. And in communication, there are two people at least involved in the communication of the language, and there is one is sender. First is primary sender, second is receiver. So sender and receiver must have the good understanding of the language, means of just communication of the messages, right? So communication, sender is called addressee, and the addresser, and the receiver is called addressee. Addresser and addressee must have rapport, must have better understanding of the communication of the language through the language process, right? It's complex, it's dynamic, it is very hard, though it is taken so simply. So there are different elements of communication. There are basically 7 elements of the communication process. See, mainly 7 elements we need to keep in the mind. What are the 7 elements? First is encoding, and second is sender, third is decoding, okay, fourth is receiver, and then fifth is message, and then sixth is channel or medium, and the last one is feedback. These 7 elements are essential for the communication system, right? Now the sender initiates communication. Sender means the person who who addresses. That is the first person. He initiates, begins communication. The sender has an idea. Sender especially has an idea. Sender has an information. Sender has feelings. Sender has emotions. Sender has certain information about the feeling, society, and the other events. That is why sender sends the message. Then he or she selects appropriate symbols to encode. Without just symbols, without the help of language, the idea of the message cannot be sent. So the sender just selects appropriate symbols, suitable symbols to encode the idea or the message. But the sender is also responsible for selecting the medium to transmit the message. What medium the sender is selecting, either through the internet or telephone or Facebook, or what may be his or her just medium, language, that would be the sender's concept, right? However, the purpose of communication will largely determine the sender's choice of symbols, medium, word, and channel. What sort of medium, what sort of language is using. Okay, though he or she has to select the medium, and it is determined through the purpose of communication is largely determined through the sender's choice of symbols, choice of language, choice of medium, choice of channels, right? The sender encodes the message, right? That means ideas, informations, feelings, and emotions are notions living in the mind of the communicator. All these ideas, notions are there in the mind of the communicator, and it does not go, those ideas do not go automatically to the receiver. So sender has to encode the message. To transmit the message, the sender carefully designs the message by selecting words that convey the intended meaning to the receiver. That sender carefully selects designs the message by selecting the words, and those through the help of the words the message is conveyed, intended meaning is conveyed to the receiver. So in this process, the transmission of message, transmission of information, communication takes place. This process of selecting and organizing a message is called encoding. Process of selecting and process of organizing the message is called encoding. And sender encodes and receiver decodes the message, right? So encoding and decoding takes place. Sender encodes the message, selects and organizes the message, and sends, and receiver decodes. The sender's main task is to encode the message in such a way that the message is received and understood as intended by the sender. Yes, the sender has to encode the message in such a way that the message is to be received, matter is to be understood, message is to be given to the passed to the receiver, is the intention of the sender according to the intended idea of the sender. Encoding the message depends on our beliefs, how we encode values, attitudes, and the past experiences. How we encode the message, that depends on our beliefs, that depends on our cultures, that depends on our values, that depends on our experiences of life, right? If we are well experienced, if we are well just identified about the beliefs and values and the system and culture of the society, and we feel easy to encode the message. Otherwise it becomes difficult. The sender selects a channel and transmits the message. Now, channel means medium. I'm talking about those 7 elements. Okay, sender selects the channels. There are different kinds of channels. And then transmits means sends the message. For effective communication, the sender has to carefully select the channel to transmit the message. Carefully, he has to select the channels. The channel can be internet. The channel can be television. The channel can be telephone. The channel can be other forms of media to give the message to the receiver. Without selecting carefully the channels, effective communication cannot take place. Because of the technological innovation, we have varieties of formal and informal channels available to select. There are various channels of just selecting message to the selecting words or channels to send the message to the receiver by the sender. Such channels include memos, one channel, notices, we can give notice, that is another channel of sending message. Another is emails, another blogs, video conferencing, face-to-face conversations, presentation on a board with slides as I'm doing right now, and then social networking sites such as Facebook, Twitter, YouTube as I'm posting it now, and LinkedIn. These are the channels through which the sender selects some of the channels according to his or her choices and sends the message, and the receiver receives the message, and then only it becomes the complete task of communication. The sender selects one of the available channels, not all the channels he or she can select, one of the available channels, either Facebook or face-to-face conversation or emails or notices or blogs or video conferencing or memos or Facebook or Twitter or YouTube or LinkedIn and other just process, Instagram maybe, but only one channel is required to select the message, right? Selects one of the available channels and transmits the message. The proper transmission of message plays an important role in the success of communication. Proper transmission. If we properly transmit, if we properly pass the message, if we are able to give the message exactly, properly, effectively, and just able to pass the message and put in the mind of the receivers, and then that is called proper, just important process of communication and proper way of communication, right? Now the receiver means audience receives the message. How that receiver receives the message? What is the process of receiving the message by the audience? Let's see. The receiver receives the message in the form of visual signals, objects, language. There would be various events, right, that can be sent. Visual signals. However, the complete process does not, communication process does not complete with the reception of the message without decoding it and comprehending the message properly. That means it doesn't mean that passing the message is enough. It is not meaningful. The process does not become complete only by receiving the message, because the receiver must decode, must understand, must comprehend the message, must translate that message passed, sent by the sender, and then only it becomes complete communication. Otherwise, only passing the message is not the process of communication. That is not the complete task of communication, right? Now receiver decodes the message. How he decodes? Decodes means translates that language, interprets that meaning into that message according to his level of understanding. The receiver interprets the message and constructs meaning out of it. He makes the meaning. Constructs means makes the meaning. Receives and interpret. Receiver receives the message, interprets the message, understands it, and just constructs the meaning out of it. Through the message, understands the meaning, right? For communication to be successful, the meaning that the receiver attaches to the message must be close to the meaning the sender had intended to convey. That means for the successful communication, effective communication, the meaning that the receiver receives must be understood, must be received according to the intended meaning of the sender. If the intended meaning of the sender is not received by the receiver, that is not a communication process. That does not become a complete communication, successful communication process. Otherwise, the communication does not take place effectively. That would be just weak communication, no complete understanding, no complete communication, effective communication, right? The receiver gives the feedback. Now, this is the last step of 7 elements. Feedback. The receiver understands the language, what the sender has sent, and gives the feedback, advises something, improves some ideas, or appreciates. It depends both positive and negative, right? Idea. Now let's see the any reaction, either it is verbal or non-verbal, about the message from the receiver is called a response. There will be response. Response is called feedback, right? The receiver in turn encodes the response and transmits back to the sender as feedback. He understands, he responds, he or she, and then gives the idea back, transmits the idea to the sender. So this is a process of communication, right? In the face-to-face communication, the audience bodily movements, facial expressions, and postures can also be forms of feedback. If it is a face-to-face conversation, face-to-face communication, and what happens? The feedback can be movement of the body, feedback can be facial expressions, feedback can be postures, how the receiver is giving that, right? But in written communication, the receiver may send out a written reply. The receiver may not do other things except giving the reply, because in written communication message there will be no visibility of movement of the body, facial expressions, and then even other gestures, postures, and the only way of responding or giving feedback to the sender of the message by the receiver in written communication is to send the written reply. This is how the communication takes place between the reader, speaker, sender, and the receiver. Thank you. You can just read it, listen it, and then you can write even in exam. You can use your own ideas in the process of communication. Thank you.